The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 182.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Scott Edinger, author of The Hidden Leader, Discover and Develop Greatness Within Your Company. Welcome, Scott, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we take a deep dive into your book, your new book, The Hidden Leader, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you personally.
Yeah, companies like AT&T and Lenovo and the Los Angeles Times and the Cleveland Heart Lab hire me to work with their senior leaders. And I start with senior leaders because as the organization goes, as the senior leaders go, so goes the organization. Mm-hmm. And I work with them on creating growth strategies and how they're going to create differentiation in their business, as well as how they're going to lead effectively. So I've written about many of those ideas in Harvard Business Review and in Forbes and in my new book, The Hidden Leader.
First off, Scott, thank you for sharing that. And now let's jump right into that book that you just mentioned, The Hidden Leader, Discover and Develop Greatness Within Your Company, which was just made available for purchase February 4th of 2015. And Scott, we're going to move quickly, but we're here to cover the top questions that our reader/future reader would like to get answered. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing The Hidden Leader?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was talking with a former colleague of mine. I used to work at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Then it was Coopers & Lybrand. And we were getting together and reminiscing about old times. And he was telling me about a project he was working on called reverse mentoring in the firm. And the notion here was that instead of senior partners mentoring the associates would mentor the senior partners. And those senior partners actually learned a great deal, not only about technology and about what associates in the firm were interested in, but they also learned a bit about client service and some new ways to approach that. And I thought that was an interesting idea, that flow of mentoring going upward. And then the next day, I read an article on reverse innovation, which was about how innovations tend to come from the larger developed nations and flow to, call it the third world countries, the far more underdeveloped nations. But there was a trend where there were innovations occurring in far more underdeveloped nations coming towards the United States and Europe. And I thought that was interesting, the flow going another way. And it got me thinking, being a guy who writes about leadership and business growth, that perhaps there was a reverse leadership flow. Not like a reverse psychology where leaders try to get people to do something the opposite, but rather where leadership flowed upward through the business as well as from the top down. So I wrote an article about that for Harvard Business Review, and it got a lot of support. And I ended up thinking about it further, and the Hidden Leader concept was born. And then I found my publisher, Amicom. So there's the abbreviated version of what is a long story.
No, I appreciate that big time. And this next question is to help differentiate. You and I talked about at the very beginning how there are hundreds of books that come out for that busy entrepreneur per month.
Sure.
So what makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
Well, there are, and having written another book on leadership, The Inspiring Leader, and dozens of articles on the topic, I know that there are probably thousands of books on leadership, if not tens of thousands on leadership, but they all seem directed at, or the majority at least, the vast majority, at people who are in positions of leadership and authority positions and positions where there's responsibility specifically to be a leader. But there's very little directed at people who are, I'll call them, your average citizen in an organization, the individual contributor, the frontline supervisor, the mid-manager. And I thought, I have seen in my consulting work with corporations a tremendous amount of leadership energy and leadership power and great leadership behaviors occurring at those levels of the organization in those areas. And I thought, it doesn't always look like the leadership you're used to seeing from a CEO or a division leader, but it is leadership nonetheless. So I thought I wanted to write about that.
Perfect. Scott, how would you suggest the reader engage with your book? Is this a book they can jump in and jump out based on information they need at that time? Cherry picking information? Or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
Well, I certainly designed it to be read from front to back. It will not offend me, and I don't think anybody would be missing anything, tremendously important if they chose to, take a staccato fashion to going through the book, a little here, a little there. I think that there's, good rationale for at least starting with chapter 1, or even the foreword, which I think Jim Kouzis and Barry Posner did an artful job of writing. In fact, I found that in their 8-page forward, sometimes I felt like, as I was reading it, that perhaps they did as good a job of explaining the essence of the hidden leader idea as I did throughout the rest of the book. So I thought they really captured it well. So I'd start there, but then certainly skip around.
So, Scott, now that we know the purpose and a little bit of the background behind the book, let's take a deep dive into the content itself. So will you take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really give this future reader a great idea of what they can expect to get out of your book?
Absolutely. My pleasure. I think there's a handful of concepts that are particularly powerful, and some of them may not necessarily be new concepts, but I've certainly done my diligent best to create a language for some of these things as it relates to leadership and the way we see it from people who are not in those traditional leadership positions. So I do a lot of consulting work, and I typically end up working with senior executives. Like I said at the start of the cast here, as your senior leaders go, so goes the rest of the organization. And one of the things I hear from CEOs and EVPs and, that C-suite group is that they wish people could act like an owner. I hear it from my smaller corporation clients with 50 people. I hear it in a Fortune 500 company, act like an owner. And that always makes sense when they're saying it to other management people. But the problem and where that starts to fall down is that when you get to the front lines of a business, the fact of the matter is, small or large, most employees of businesses have no idea what it's like to own a business. There's not a mental set or a framework for it. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a group in a call center, and I just threw the idea out, what does that mean? And somebody in a very smart alecky, but I thought, really hilarious way said, so does that mean I get to drive a nicer car, live in a nicer house, and do what I want to? Act like an owner. So there was laughter, but I thought that was revealing. Most of the time when I start to peel back that question, I start to hear things like, I wish people would, be more results oriented and really give their earnest best, go that extra mile for the organization and understand all of our capability and all the potential we have here and work together as a team. I start to hear all of these kinds of things. What would that look like if people acted like an owner? And they start to sound to me a lot like leadership behaviors. So the essence of this idea of acting like an owner is a big thread woven throughout the whole notion of hidden leadership. And one of those characteristics is that those people are very results oriented. They're very outcome focused. So you've all been in organizations, I'm guessing you've been in organizations where people get wound up in the bureaucracy, the triumph of means over the end. And hidden leaders really don't think that way. They look for what the outcome is or how success is defined in any given endeavor, and then figure out how they're going to do something. So they don't get locked in. I'm not saying that they're renegades to process by any stretch, but they're certainly willing to and able to look for what's the result that we are seeking and to understand that result and to look for a way to get there. So number one is a real outcome focused, this notion of acting like an owner. Second thing that I see a lot of, and this is another really vital characteristic, is that they lead through relationships. So remember, these are people without position or title authority. So, to be, kind of humorous about it, they can't really boss anybody around or tell anybody what to do necessarily. So they're really good at leading through relationships. And that does not mean friendships or likability or they're the popular person. Not that any of those things are bad, but that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about relationships. There's actually a few different components of how they lead through relationships that are really important. So number one is about their credibility. So usually these hidden leaders have some kind of great technical expertise. That need not necessarily be technological, although it could be. But in short, they're really good at something. They could be really good at customer service. They could be really excellent in engineering. They might have great technology skills. Whatever it is, they get great credibility from that expertise, that technical expertise. Secondly, they understand the organization broadly. They really understand way more than just their function. So remember, these are the front lines of a business and the middle of a business, typically very functionally oriented. So they understand beyond just their function. You've probably talked with people in organizations where you can't tell the left hand is talking to the right. These folks actually are the left hand, right hand, and they talk to everybody. So they understand broadly, so they're able to work cross-functionally and knit teams together when it comes time to get something done. And then thirdly, they're able to make a connection with people. That is, they're human. They're not a robot. They don't engage with people as a task or a process or a thing to do. They actually have a level of personal respect and engage at what I have written about as an emotional connection. Now, when I wrote about the emotional connection for Harvard Business Review, I was very, very careful to make sure that I'm not talking about wild displays of emotion or outbursts of emotion. I'm talking about making a human connection, and they're really good at that. So the combination of credibility, broad understanding of the business, and a strong emotional connection are the way they lead through relationships. And then the last thing I wanted to share that I think is really at the heart of everything is the idea that they demonstrate integrity. And I'm not talking about integrity that is the don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. I mean, obviously that is possessing of integrity to not do those things, but they're sort of just table stakes among most of the people you interact with. So when I talk about this demonstration of integrity, they're the kinds of things that sound like this. They are your go-to people. You can count on them to get things done. You can trust their judgment and their accountability. You can trust the fact that when you ask them for feedback, you're not going to get a smokescreen. You're going to get the honest opinion, and they're going to tell you the truth about something. They're not necessarily argumentative about that. They don't have to, press a particular issue really hard, but you can certainly count on them to speak what they think about the business, usually for the betterment of the organization. We've all been in meetings before where people aren't saying something, that proverbial elephant in the room. These are the folks that are willing to say so and have the communication skills to do so politely. So this ability to demonstrate integrity, to be accountable, to be the person that is counted on, and to be the one who people trust to go the extra mile and to get things done is really important. So those are the cascade of characteristics that when you think about what does it mean to be a leader in an organization if you are not leading through position or authority, how is that done? And I like the term the hidden leader because those characteristics are easy to miss as leadership. You could say, hey, someone's just doing their job. But if you break them down, they start to look an awful lot like the leadership skills that executives need to work on too. They just show up a little bit differently. So that's the summary. I hope I didn't talk too fast, kind of like the guy in the FedEx commercial there. But.
No, Scott, you did a fantastic job. And now we're going to ask that you take it a step further, or even break it down one step further, I should say. And that's if the reader can only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of your entire book, everything you just discussed with us, what would you want that to be?
Very simply, that leadership has nothing to do with position or title. It's what your actions are. And I'd leave it at just that sentence.
No, that's perfect. And you said some quote-worthy things and gone over some quote-worthy things already so far in this interview. And that leads into our next question as well. Is what's a favorite quote, something that you wrote from your book? And will you take a second to explain what it means to you?
Yeah, so it's the quotation that I'm going to share is actually not in the book, but I have been using it on the proverbial book tour when I've been out talking about the book to different audiences. And the quotation's from John Quincy Adams, 6th President of the United States between 1825 and 1829. And the quotation is this: if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, and become more, you are a leader. And I really like that quotation because for me, it captures the essence of being a leader. It really captures the spirit of hidden leadership, recognizing that it isn't about titles or authority or jobs. It is about your actions. What you do determines if you are a leader or not, nothing else.
That's perfect and very, very powerful. So, Scott, we're going to put that Entrepreneurs Are on the Road right now, making the dream come true. So we're going to put that in the show notes at the elpodcast.com so they can go back and look at that and reflect on that more. Cool. This next question, obviously, is a book-centric podcast. We have to ask for a recommendation. And we don't just ask for any. We really ask for the recommendation. So what is a book that you could recommend to our listeners based on the way that it's impacted your life, created a lifestyle or paradigm shift for you?
So I talked with you beforehand, and one of the things that I had mentioned was I have a hard time, when people ask me about books and what I recommend, because I've read a lot of books, and it's hard for me to find one that I think, really changed the trajectory of my life. But there is one. It's not a particularly popular book. It was written in, I think, like 1994, 95, and it's called High Performance Sales Organizations. And it's a good book. It's not, the concepts in it are solid, but to me at the time, and I'll share with you why this is important. At the time, I was in a human resources job, and I really wasn't interested in sales when I first started in human resources. I learned otherwise eventually. But one of the things that book illustrated for me as I was considering career changes was the power of this notion of selling not being something that is pushy, making customers buy things they don't want, don't need, and can't afford, but rather that a sales organization and sales professionals could actually create a lot of value by helping clients to see things that they hadn't considered or to address their needs. And I thought that was powerful. And it was at a time when I was looking for jobs, and that book was given to me, and it actually changed the trajectory of my job search, which I could say changed the trajectory of my career.
That's excellent. Will you say that title one more time?
Yeah, High Performance Sales Organizations. And the original was published by Irwin Publishing. I can look at it on my shelf there.
Perfect. Well, very good. Well, Scott, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also get information on your book, The Hidden Leader?
2 ways that I'll encourage. Number one, I'd love it if you came to my website, www.edinger, Edinger, group, group.com, edingergroup.com. And on my website, I have videos and articles indexed by topic on the topics of hidden leadership, inspiring leadership, my other book, and probably 50 articles from HBR and Forbes that I've written that are indexed by topic. So you can find a lot of stuff there, as well as some of the tools that are in the book, The Hidden Leader. And then there's an additional website for the book called hiddenleader.com. And you can go there, and there's additional content and some of the QR codes that are scannable in the book for some of the surveys and the tools are available there as well.
Perfect. Scott, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what we could sometimes call your baby, but sharing your book with us.
It does sometimes feel like a baby. It took longer than the gestation of the rhino here. So, yes, thank you.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like to get more information on Scott or his book, The Hidden Leader, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com. And as always, if you'd like an opportunity to win this book, visit the elpodcast.com and become a VIP.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.